What if I told you that millions of people are using books as therapy, without even realizing it? Right now, there's a literary phenomenon that's generating over $600 million annually, and it's not just about steamy romance or magical worlds. It's about something far deeper, something that reveals the hidden psychology of an entire generation. Stick around, because what I'm about to show you will completely change how you see the explosive rise of romantasy, and maybe even explain why your feed is flooded with people sobbing over fictional characters. The psychology thesis. Let's start with the numbers that'll blow your mind. The romantasy genre, that's romance plus fantasy for those just tuning in, saw 40% surge in sales last year alone. We're talking about a market that jumped from $454 million to over $610 million in just 12 months. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't just about book sales. According to research published in the Journal of Popular Romance Studies, the psychology behind romance reading reveals something profound about human emotional regulation. Dr. Kristen Ramsdell's seminal work Romance Fiction, a guide to the genre, demonstrates that romance readers aren't just seeking entertainment, they're engaging in what psychologists call bibliotherapy. Think about it. When you're reading about Feyre from A Court of Thorns and Roses overcoming trauma and claiming her power, your brain is actually processing those experiences as if they were your own. Neuroscientist Dr. Paul Holzer's research on narrative transportation shows that when we deeply engage with fictional characters, our brains fire the same neural pathways as if we were living those experiences ourselves. But here's where romantasy gets genius, and this is backed by actual research from the University of Toronto's studies on escapist fiction. These books don't just transport you, they create what psychologists call a safe space for emotional rehearsal. You get to experience triumph, healing, and empowerment without real-world consequences. The fantasy element? That's not just window dressing. According to Dr. Maria Totter's work on fairy tale psychology, fantasy settings allow our subconscious to process complex emotions and situations through metaphor and allegory. When you're reading about a fae court, you're not really reading about magical beings, you're exploring power dynamics, consent, and transformation in a psychologically safe environment. And here's the kicker: the repetitive tropes that critics mock? The enemies to lovers, the fated mates, the chosen one narratives? Psychologist Dr. Sherry Turkle's research on digital intimacy suggests these predictable patterns serve as emotional anchors, providing the psychological safety that allows readers to explore deeper, more complex feelings. Now, before you think I'm just here to praise the genre, let's pump the brakes and examine the other side of this coin, because there are legitimate concerns that we can't ignore. Some literary critics and psychologists argue that romantasy might be creating unrealistic expectations about relationships and personal growth. Dr. Susan Quilliam, a relationship psychologist, has pointed out in her research that heavy consumption of idealized romantic narratives can sometimes lead to what she terms romance addiction, where readers become so dependent on the emotional highs of fictional relationships that real-world connections feel inadequate. There's also the argument about escapism versus engagement. Some mental health professionals worry that if people are using books as therapy, they might be avoiding actual therapeutic work or real-world problem solving. It's like asking, is this healing, or is it just really sophisticated avoidance? And let's be real about the capitalism aspect here. The book talk phenomenon has turned reading into a consumption-driven social media trend. Are we witnessing genuine psychological healing, or are we looking at a brilliantly marketed form of emotional consumerism? Plus, there's the diversity question. While romantasy has made strides in representation, critics argue that the genre still often centers certain types of experiences and bodies, potentially excluding or marginalizing other forms of trauma and healing. Finding the deeper truth. So here's where things get really interesting. After diving deep into the research, I think we're missing the bigger picture if we just debate whether romantasy is good or bad. What if the real story here isn't about books at all? What if romantasy's explosion is actually a massive, collective response to something much bigger happening in our society? Think about it. This genre exploded during and after the pandemic, a time when millions of people, especially young women, were dealing with unprecedented levels of anxiety, isolation, and uncertainty. According to the American Psychological Association's 2023 Stress in America report, women aged 18-34 reported the highest levels of chronic stress in recorded history. Now, here's what's fascinating. Dr. Melanie Green's research on narrative psychology shows that when people feel powerless in their real lives, they gravitate toward stories where characters gain agency and control. The romantasy boom isn't just about romance or fantasy, it's about psychological restoration. But here's the twist that really got me thinking. The community aspect, the book talk phenomenon, that's not just marketing. According to Dr. Henry Jenkins' work on participatory culture, these online book communities are creating what he calls affinity spaces where people process shared experiences and emotions. So when millions of people are simultaneously reading about characters who overcome trauma, reclaim their power, and find healing relationships, they're not just consuming content, they're participating in a collective form of emotional processing. It's like group therapy, but nobody calls it that. The business success? That's not the cause, it's the symptom. The real story is that Romantasy has accidentally become one of the largest informal mental health movements in modern history. And maybe that's exactly what we needed. Maybe the traditional mental health system wasn't accessible or appealing enough for a generation that grew up online. Maybe they found their own way to process trauma and build resilience, and it just happened to look like reading about dragon shifters and fey courts. The broader implications. This raises some pretty mind-blowing questions about the future of healing and community, doesn't it? If millions of people are finding genuine emotional support through fictional narratives, what does that tell us about the stories we're not telling in real life? What does it say about the healing spaces we're not creating? And here's something that really keeps me up at night. If Romantasy readers are essentially practicing emotional scenarios through fiction, are they actually better prepared for real-world relationships and challenges than people who don't engage with these narratives? Think about it. They've mentally rehearsed consent conversations. They've explored power dynamics. They've witnessed characters model healthy communication and boundary setting. Is that not a form of preparation? But then again, does this create a generation that expects their real-world relationships to provide the same emotional intensity and narrative satisfaction as their favorite books? Are we setting people up for disappointment, or are we raising the bar for what healthy relationships should look like? Conclusion. So here's what I want you to think about as you go about your day. The next time you see someone getting emotional about a book, or posting about their latest book talk obsession, remember that you might be witnessing something much deeper than entertainment. You might be seeing someone engage in their own form of healing, community building, and emotional growth. And honestly, that's pretty beautiful. Whether you're a Romantasy reader yourself, or you've never picked up a fantasy romance in your life, this phenomenon is revealing something important about how we process trauma, seek connection, and build resilience in the modern world. So I want to hear from you. Have you noticed any books, shows, or stories that seem to help you process difficult emotions? Or maybe you've experienced that thing where a fictional character's journey somehow helped you understand your own life better? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this deep dive into the psychology of popular culture got your brain spinning, make sure to subscribe because we're going to keep exploring the hidden psychology behind the phenomena that shape our world. Next week, we're diving into the psychology behind why certain TikTok sounds make you feel nostalgic for experiences you never had. Trust me, it's going to mess with your head in the best possible way.